Hello and welcome to Eye on New Mexico. I'm Nicole Brady. Stuart Dyson and I thank you for joining us this morning. And we're going to be talking about the big issue of the week, graduation rates, AYP scores, education topics in general this morning. We are actually talking to us a very special guest this morning, Franklin Schargel, who is an educational consultant and author and has a unique perspective on what may be going on both here in New Mexico and elsewhere in the world education-wise. And we wanted to start actually with Franklin because we're going back to the school season here. Next week we're going to be having on Veronica Garcia, the Education Secretary, and Winston Brooks, Superintendent of Albuquerque Public Schools. So it's going to be a couple weeks of very interesting and informative educational topics. But Franklin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Franklin spent 33 years in the New York school system as a teacher, counselor, and an administrator before he went on a crusade to look into the dropout problem in America and really do something about it. So Franklin, start by just telling us a little bit about your background.
As you've indicated, I've spent 33 years, a third of a century in the New York City schools. Moved here 10 years ago. And my last position was as an administrator in an all-minority, two-thirds poverty school, Title I school, high school, where the dropout rate was 12.9%. In 3 years, we lowered it to 2.1%. We send 72% of our first generation high school graduates to post-secondary school, increased family involvement 1,440% over a 9-month period, raised $5 million mainly in in-kind services from industry, signed business partnerships, college partnerships. In the second most teacher unionized city in the United States, New York City, union grievances went from 29 to 2. As the union bought in and saw that their life was much easier. And it was a great success story, and I was privileged to be part of that.
Okay, I'm sold.
Yeah. You obviously did something right, yes.
How do we start fixing New Mexico, where just this past week we learned that our graduation rate statewide is 54%, leaving the question, you know, pretty much the rest of those, you can figure it out. It isn't rocket science. Most of the rest of those people you can categorize as dropouts. And in Albuquerque, it's even worse, at a graduation rate of below half, 46% of the kids who enter as freshmen in 9th grade wind up earning a diploma. What are we going to do?
Well, obviously, Dr. Garcia, the Secretary of Education, and Winston Brooks, the Superintendent, and even the Governor have now proposed solutions to the problem. I don't believe those are going to work because there are 5 causes of why kids drop out of school. And unless we attack the root causes of the problem, we're going to be on the merry-go-round in 5 years and 2 years saying we still have a problem. The first cause, in no particular order, are the students themselves. They make wrong decisions like dropping out of school, joining gangs, taking drugs, alcohol, committing crimes, becoming pregnant. Second is the family that they come from. There are direct correlations between low-income families and kids who drop out of school. School cultures which contradict family cultures which say you need to go out to work because we need the money. Families who speak a language other than English as a first language. And we could go on with this. The community that they come from. They live on the wrong side of the tracks. Community that has drugs and alcohol and gangs and violence. That becomes a major problem. The fourth cause are the schools themselves. Schools that treat all children the same. And one-size-fits-all education in reality fits nobody. We need to change that. We have counselors who are overburdened. We have teachers who are overworked and really underpaid. And of course, the fifth cause is the teacher. We need not only highly qualified teachers who know what to teach, but we need highly effective teachers. We need teachers who know how to teach. At the summit that we held in Albuquerque in May, the data came out asking the students who had dropped out, what do you want? What would have kept you in school? And the answer was a teacher who cared.
Wow.
So that's a growing category across the United States. And I call them push-outs. You're not functioning the way we need. We need to get you out of my classroom. We need to get you out of my school. And the last thing is we need to benchmark. If we look at the data, 17 of our charter schools made AYP. None of our high schools, public high schools.
Let's, for the viewers, an alphabet soup sometimes. I'm sure there's a few like me who forget about all these initials. AYP, adequate
yearly progress.
Annual yearly
Adequate yearly
progress.
Yes.
Under the No Child Left Behind Act, this is something you got to attain, but very few schools actually do.
Your comment on that too. I mean, this week when AYP came out, so many schools did not meet AYP, and this wasn't just in New Mexico. This was a lot of parts of the country. They say that it's messed up. The No Child Left Behind is not doing us any favors. That AYP is the standards are strange and hard to meet, and nobody can. You can't expect schools to meet that. What's your reaction to that response?
I agree. In fact, the U.S. Department of Education says within 3 years, 85% of the schools in the United States will not make AYP. Because one, even if you make AYP this year, the bar goes up next year and it becomes more difficult. The other thing is that special education students are expected to make AYP, and that becomes a difficult challenge because many of these kids are learning disabled and have their own unique problems. And so, as Dr. Garcia pointed out, there are 36 ways that you can fail to make AYP.
Yeah.
Right, you're judged on 37 categories, and you mess up just one of them.
Right.
You don't make it, sorry.
Right.
It's like you get one wrong out of 37, you fail.
Yeah.
You were going there, and I kind of interrupted about the AYP thing, as I have a tendency to do. But you were talking about the achievements of charter schools.
Right. We need to look at why certain states, certain schools are making AYP. I have two friends and two co-authors who work for the Alabama Department of Education. Their AYP figures came out yesterday, earlier this week, and they're at 86% in Alabama. We need to find out why they've been successful. Some people will claim that they've lowered their standards, but in speaking to these individuals, they're saying it's not true. At the same time, our schools need to be globally competitive. The best graduates, not dropouts, the best graduates coming out of Albuquerque schools are not competing for jobs with the best graduates coming out of Santa Fe schools, but the best graduates in the world. We understand that companies like Honda and Hyundai are global companies. We understand that you can drink Coca-Cola around the world. We understand the global competitiveness of businesses. We need to make our schools globally competitive. If we don't, not only will Albuquerque as a city fail, but the state of New Mexico will have problems. And if we look at what China has done, and if we look at what India has done, they have focused their attention on educational improvement. It is not simply the wide shotgunning effect. They've gone to education as the way, as a means up, go from third world nations to global competitors of the United States.
What is the wide shotgunning effect?
Well, what we do is we shoot a lot of pellets in the air. Hopefully some of the pellets will hit, and because they hit, we're very happy, but many of the pellets miss.
And that's what we do to fix educate when we put programs out there. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
When the government says we're going to do this now, or?
I went to school and we had blackboards, and we said, well, if we remove blackboards and we turn them to green boards, education will dramatically improve. And then when that didn't happen, we went to whiteboards, and now in education we're into smart boards, and that hasn't had a dramatic effect. So we're trying to fix education around the fringes really than attacking the root causes of the problems.
It's so overwhelming, though. I mean, there's, you mentioned you went through the 5 or 6 causes of dropout, and I mean, there's so many things going on. Such a battle. I mean, you say about the teachers, the dropouts that said they needed a teacher that cared, but if the parent didn't care, then how is the teacher fighting that battle and winning that battle? And I mean, it just seems like there's so much. So I would, where's a place to start? I guess. What would be, in your opinion?
Well, we have developed, we being Dr. Jay Smink and the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson, 15 strategies, which the United States Department of Education acknowledges will solve the problem. And we start with 3 at the very beginning. First is family involvement. We need families to get into schools, come back to schools, and hopefully Governor Richardson's proposal of opening the schools and using computers will also bring adults into the school to learn how to work computers and to show their children that there's a value in going to school. The second is early literacy. There is no such thing as a high school dropout. It's not an event. It's a process that begins as early as kindergarten, according to Arizona State University's School of Education. So we need to start that process. We need to get children reading and writing on the 3rd grade level by the 3rd grade. Again, there are correlations when children drop out because they are not reading on grade level, and they've been promoted because of seat time. They don't disrupt classes, let's promote them. They are helpful in classrooms, let's promote them. We can't do that any longer. We're actually performing a disservice to these young people by promoting them. And we need to build in an immediate, I call it, safety net for students. We can't wait until the end of the year. We cannot wait for the end of the term. The minute we identify that children are not mastering the material that they need to, we need to step in and after school, Saturday schools, we need to do all sorts of things to get kids to read on grade level.
So, okay, then that you are on board with the governor's ideas, which he unveiled this week, in the middle of the week, to offer classes online for those who've dropped out and who are willing to come back and try to make it. Also keep the schools having a flexible school day, high schools. I think Albuquerque High currently does that.
Right.
He wants it all over the state. That's not the shotgun blast.
Part of
those are pellets that are going to hit some.
Right, and and to the credit of the governor, I like that part of the proposal. The part that I have difficulty with is that the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, did research and said that the #1 cause of why children drop out of school is boredom. So how do we expect these children who might be working after school, who may have jobs already, low-paying, low-performing jobs, but may have jobs, how do we get them back into school if they have other obstacles in their path to stop them from returning to school?
Yeah.
And so that's still, we need to, how do you remove boredom? Well, you have teachers, and teaching is a calling. It's definitely like a missionary. People go into teaching because they want to be teachers. They're consciously aware it's not salary that draws them in. And part of the problem we need to face down the road is that we have a higher dropout rate of teachers in the United States than we do of students in the United States.
Wow.
And the reason most teachers are leaving the schools is because they're not getting administrative support.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We have to take a quick break here, but this could go on for a long time. We'll come back with more with Franklin Schargel right after this break. Stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us, and welcome back again. We are talking with Franklin Schargel, education author and consultant. Spent 33 years in New York schools as a teacher, counselor, and administrator. Did some great things in the school system there with dropouts and turning that around. And we've been talking about
did something here that blew our minds right there before the break. There's a dropout problem among teachers,
right?
And you just touched on that, and I'd like you to pick up on that and tell us more about it. I hadn't really thought about it, but then you start thinking of teachers that people who used to be teachers.
So many people.
How bad is it?
It's really tragic in this country, and we will, as I said, down the road face that price, because it's not that we have a teacher shortage in this country. We have a retention problem. We are not holding on to the teachers who are in the schools. We are not supporting their actions. We're not encouraging them to stay. We are putting the least trained and the least experienced teachers in the most difficult of the schools that we have, not just in Albuquerque, not just in New Mexico, but in the United States.
Wow. It's like,
I-
shooting yourself in the foot
Yeah.
when the race begins.
I mean, yeah, of course, you need a good teacher, in every classroom, and you need a good administration to back them up and good policies. Is the problem the support system for teachers? Is it No Child Left Behind? Is it the lack of money? And I know you have some interesting thoughts on money that we want to get into too. But what is it that's not there that's creating that dropout rate among teachers?
When you ask the teachers why they're leaving the field, they are saying that it's lack of administrative support. They're not getting the support either from the superintendent or the principals that they have. So that addresses the first of the questions that you've asked of what's the problem. The second is it's not about money. Teachers, as I have indicated, are consciously aware that the schools and salaries are not paid. There's a calling. These people want to be in school, at least at the very outset. And possibly one of the things we're doing incorrectly is having student teaching at the end of a college career rather than at the beginning, so that people will know what to do. The other thing is that we tend to believe, and many of the business community believe, that education is expensive. Actually, it's not. Ignorance is very expensive. According to U.S. Department of Justice, 82% of all prisoners in the United States are school dropouts.
82%
of all prisoners in jails, federal and local prisons, are school dropouts.
Smoke.
So we either pay for education upstream or the lack of education downstream.
Yeah.
And prisons average in the United States $41,000 a year
Per prisoner.
per prisoner. So that becomes the problem. The other thing is, if it was simply a problem of money, Washington, D.C. spends more money than any other state in the United States. According to the data I've just obtained, D.C. now spends $14,324 a year.
Per student.
They should have the best educational system if they're spending money, but they haven't focused their attention on improvement. China and India, who have leapt from last place as the third world nations to now being a global competitor, have focused on education. And Thomas Friedman, in his book, The World is Flat, said a student in Bangalore, India is now as globally competitive as a student in Bangor, Maine. We need to focus our attention on educational improvement in the 21st century, or else we will never attract major businesses into this state. Honda has opened a manufacturing plant in Tennessee. Montgomery, Alabama now is the home of Hyundai, Korean car manufacturer. Kia, a Korean car manufacturer, is now in Alabama. In Georgia. Georgia and New Mexico have the lowest high school graduation rate. We share 48. Nevada is below us. In the past, we used to say in New Mexico, thank God for Alabama. I've been in Alabama. Alabama is now saying thank God for New Mexico.
Yeah. Oh, that hurts.
Yeah.
You don't know. How about Mississippi? Are
Well,
we
we
still
need-
okay compared to that? Never. I'm being facetious.
It's just not fun to be on that low end.
No, it's not.
No.
And again, it's not about money, because some schools are spending less money. Alabama spends less money per student than we do, and they're achieving more. We need to look at what they're doing, and we need to benchmark that.
You have traveled around the world and looked at systems and how they're doing it and researched books. You talk about being globally competitive. I mean, what are you seeing? Are there things we can steal from these other countries that they're doing right? Or what is your observation on that?
We should be stealing from them. Again, the focus in China and India is on education. Now, they're having their own problems. I mean, 200 million children have dropped out of school in India. That is a problem. 3/4 of the Indian population are functionally illiterate, according to the United Nations, so that's a problem. But China, their elementary school teachers are specialists. They're not generalists. I found that absolutely fantastic and knowledgeable in what they are doing. In other words, they specialize in math and science rather than being an early educator. So yes, we can take that. In Spain, they're focusing on improving their middle and high schools. But we don't have to go outside of the United States to look. Just to bring it back, Georgia, which again shares the near bottom with New Mexico, they brought in graduation coaches. They're going to surpass us. They're going to move quickly. And it's not because our schools are getting worse. Our schools are improving, and Dr. Garcia pointed that out in her report. But we're not improving as quickly as Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia is. And we need to look at what they're doing and steal as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and during the week, APS Superintendent Brooks made that point that when it comes to the AYP, that we had the vast majority of the schools actually were doing better.
Right.
Yes.
Showing improvement on the test across the board for most of these schools, yet it just wasn't enough to achieve the level where the bar currently is, and it's going up again next year. Well, we should point out that he did see an increase of 6 schools that did.
That did pass AYP, 6 more than the previous year.
Yeah, and remember too, he sort of handed this thing. He hasn't been on the job all that long.
No.
I keep that in mind always about this.
You know, and you go ahead.
No.
I know. I mean, you know, the improvements are there, and who is to say how? I mean, you know, you're saying we're not improving as fast as we need to be,
Right?
Because what is the ultimate goal? I mean, we want a qualified workforce. We want to be competing, and we need to. I guess you're saying we need to improve a lot faster than we are.
Absolutely. And both reports from Dr. Garcia and from Winston Brooks have pointed out that, and it's a 2-part announcement. One, AYP was part of the announcement, but the other part of the announcement was our graduation rate.
Yeah.
And we need to, I'm focusing the attention not on AYP, which is a very difficult challenge and hurdle, but I'm focusing the attention on our graduation rate, which has not gone up. And that's an important factor. These other countries, the other states, they're improving their graduation rates.
What do we have to do? Where do we start?
Look at the 5 causes that I've identified. Look at the 15 strategies which I've posted on my website, copyright free, which is my last name. We're just losing too many children. Again, 171 school buses leave school every single day loaded with children, never to return. That is our daily school dropout rate in this country. As a country, we cannot afford it. We know that the society is rapidly aging. We know we will be dependent on far too many of our young people who need to get, at minimum, as Dr. Garcia has pointed out, a high school diploma. So we need to focus our attention on that.
You know, we kind of talked earlier, and the governor said the same thing this week about a cultural shift, and there has to be, I guess it's about valuing education. You mentioned that. I mean, talk about that a little, because that seems like that can be difficult to penetrate. You know, putting a different view on education within our communities.
There are 3 things I believe that will improve education. The first is leadership. We need to change the way we select and train leaders. The second is we need to take toxic school cultures, toxic to students, student learning, parents, and staff, and transform them to embrace learning. And the third is we need to create high-performing classrooms. We have written 2 books now dealing with the first of the 2 challenges, the leadership and the school culture. And we went to what are called 90-90-90 schools, 90% minority, 90% poverty, 90% academic success, and asked the leaders, why are you successful? How do we benchmark what you have done? I just recently returned from an unnamed state and taught a lesson, because I missed the classroom. And in that classroom, there were 14 interruptions in a 45-minute lesson. That's toxicity. I looked outside and I saw a trophy case, and it was filled with athletic awards. There was nothing that listed any academic achievement. I'm not saying take out the trophy cases filled with athletic awards, but start putting in the ones that have academic achievement, because schools weren't created for athletics. They were created. That's toxicity. I asked the principal of the school, you've been principal for 6 years, what's your proudest moment? And the principal said, we have just finished building this 11-foot high fence.
To keep them in?
I asked my host on the way out, I suppressed my New York attitude, and I said, was the fence built to keep kids in or to keep kids out?
Yeah.
And so that's toxicity. You know that we use parents in many of our schools to sell things. Why don't we use them for tutoring and mentoring of our weakest students? I mean, that's toxicity. How do we use and abuse parents? How do we chase parents out of our schools? Staff, when staff transfers out of school, I mean, why do they transfer out? We need to identify, we need to find out, and we need to look at these 90-90-90 schools, these 390-90-90 schools that we contacted. How did they achieve the success? They said, we treat everyone in our building as if they are family. That's the bus drivers, that's the custodians, that's the dietitians, that's staff, that's students, that's parents. And family does not allow family to fail. The other key line was, how do you measure school success? When students and staff run into the building on Monday morning as quickly as they run out of the building on Friday afternoon.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Well, you know what? There's some big goals, but you know, we pointed out some possible solutions here today, and so you know, thank you. We're running out of time here, but Franklin Schargel, I wanted to point out, you know, your book is Helping Students Graduate. You brought in, I think we might have a picture of that actually, and if anyone does want further information, Schargel.com.
Right.
Just your name. That's CHARGEL.
GEL.com. Very good.
Yes, there it is. And you know, again, thank you so much for bringing your points of view to the table.
And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, and we're going to be continuing the education discussion next week on Eye on New Mexico. So be sure to tune in then. Thanks for watching.
We'll have you back.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you. Absolutely.